I want to make this super quick video because a friend of mine asked me to desolder his Corsa PCB. And I figured because I'm desoldering this, I make a video about a new desoldering technique that I personally learned. This is not a new desoldering technique in terms of just came out. I'm sure a lot of you already know this, but for me, I have only known 3 ways of desoldering. So let's go over that real quick. This is not going to be as in-depth of a video in terms of desoldering. If you want an in-depth video, please check my desoldering and soldering and Mil-Max guide, which I'll link up here somewhere. In that video, I go over all 3, how to solder, how to desolder, and how to Mil-Max, at least the ways that I know. But yeah, so originally I only knew about 3 ways to desolder. The first way, quite simply, using a soldering pump in one hand, and let's just pretend this is my soldering iron, okay? I don't have my soldering iron plugged in, it's over there. But pretend this is my soldering iron, and pretend this is my desoldering pump. So I have an engineer solder sucker here. The first way is simply heating up the solder joint with the soldering iron, and then priming my solder sucker, which is basically pushing it down. And once I see the solder start to melt, I come in and I press the button and it sucks in the solder. So that's the first method. That's the first method that many of us learn because honestly, it's relatively easy and simple. Because if you're soldering, you already have a soldering iron. And if you want to desolder, you just buy a desoldering pump. So that's pretty easy, right? You use 2 hands, it's relatively cheap. And a lot of cases, that's really all you need. Say you're a baller or you want quality of life improvement. Some people buy a desoldering gun like this FR301, which is very popular. And it's basically the same principle, but you only have to use one hand. Well, you use one hand sometimes to hold the PCB. Sometimes you'll be holding it like this and you're desoldering. Sometimes you'll have it lying down on your flat surface and you come in with the gun and you desolder it that way. But basically, it's a quality of life improvement because your hand's not cramping. You can go through many switches with this. The cons is obviously it's more expensive and you have to make sure to maintain this, have proper maintenance. So if you find out that it's jamming or it's not sucking as strongly as it used to, then you have to clean this out. It's relatively easy to clean this all out. But again, you have to buy additional parts. You might even have to buy a new desoldering nozzle if this one breaks. So it's probably the most expensive option. It works really well as well. And the third method I learned by having to desolder an OEM board, my Logitech G710 Pluses. So with that, I needed to use wick and flux. So I'll throw up a picture here, but basically what you would do is you have your desoldering wick, which is actually copper, and then you have some flux. And what you do is you put the flux on whatever you want to desolder. So in my case, a solder joint. And then you use a copper wick, you place it on the flux, beside the flux, basically contacting the flux and the soldering joint that you want to desolder. And then you come in with a soldering iron on top of the copper braid, and it basically sucks the solder into the braid. So this I found is really useful for the hard to get spots. Maybe you can't get your desoldering gun at the right angle because remember the desoldering gun, you have to be flat. You don't want it to not make full contact with whatever you're desoldering. Or maybe you need something more delicate because if you leave the desoldering gun or if you leave your soldering iron on for too long on the spot you're trying to desolder, it can damage the PCB, it can lift the pad. So you use a copper braid or desoldering braid and you use flux. Those are the 3 methods that I learned. However, when I was making my soldering and desoldering guide, and as I was transferring it into written form, somebody told me that they actually have another method, which is why I'm making this video. What they said that they used was basically a middle ground between a desoldering pump and soldering iron and a desoldering gun, which is basically a pump, but it also had the tip of a desoldering gun. Not only is it a mixture of both, but it's actually much, much cheaper than an actual desoldering gun. If you're having trouble with a desoldering pump, the standard desoldering pump and desoldering iron, and you want to get something more expensive, but you can't afford a 301 or you don't want to get a desoldering gun, check these out. Because what I got this for was 40 bucks. I'm sure you can find them on sale for a lot cheaper. But yeah, I really wanted to get this PCB done. And I thought, what better way to test this out? My version does not come with an adjustable temperature. Basically, what it told me was you just plug this in, wait 3 minutes, and it should be hot enough. And the premise for this is basically the same as the desoldering gun and the pump together. So what you do, at least this version, so you prime it, right? You prime it, press it down, and then when the tip is hot, you put it on whatever you want to desolder, and then you press the button. So it combines the pump and the front of a desoldering gun. Pretty cool. So let's test this bad boy out as I desolder my friend's Matrix Corsa PCB. Remember to also have a fume extractor. I'm not going to turn it on for the first couple of soldering joints because if I turn it on, you're not going to be able to hear me because it's somewhat loud, right? So I plugged it in. My unit says wait 3 minutes. I'll wait 3 minutes. I'll talk about what came with this unit. And again, I'm sure there may be better units, cheaper units, different units. I just found one that seemed to be something that was decent and well priced. So this unit came with a little cleaning wire, similar to how the FR301 has a cleaning wire. It also came with 3 different tips. Depending on how large your soldering joint is, I guess, there's the tips. Okay, so now the thing is, I'm going to have to kind of shimmy this. So what I'm going to do is I'll show this camera. So I'm going to press down. I'm going to put this flush on the solder joint, and then I'm going to press this button. So let's see if I can figure out which one is on my camera, is on my microscope here. So I'm going to put this down. Boom. Look at that. Look how easy that was. I want you all to feast your eyes on this. As you can see, the majority of the switches from this Corsa PCB, no problem. This thing is freaking amazing. I'll go over this more after I finish, but yeah, this is amazing. This is fantastic. I wish I knew about this earlier. And this is a PCB that has been desoldered once and it's been soldered twice. So it looks a little worse for wear, but as long as it works at the very end, and as long as the pads are still there, heck, even if the pads aren't still there, you can still make it work, but that's for another day. You see these switches. What I want you to be very careful about is when you're desoldering switches, do not use a crazy amount of force to pull out the switches. Because if you don't eliminate all of the solder that holds the switch together, even the tiniest bits of solder. Oh, let's see if I can zoom in here. See right there? Holding the switch connector, holding the switch pin to the pad. That'll keep a switch stuck. And I know this from firsthand experience. If you just yank on the switch and you don't realize that there's a little solder still sticking there, you can either pull everything but the switch leg out, which is not great, or you could even damage the pad. So what you want to do in these situations, what I like to do is, yeah, you can use copper braid and soldering flux and suck it away. Or you can also re-add solder. You re-add solder as if you're soldering that switch leg. And then you just desolder because doing so allows the desoldered gun, the pump, whatever it is that you use to hold on and latch on to that solder. Because right now it's difficult for the pump to latch onto that. But if we make joint again, let's solder this boy. Put it down. All right. As you can see, we basically re-soldered it. Let's add some more. Because the more solder we add here, I'm not talking like a crazy amount, but the more solder we add, the easier it'll be for the pump to latch on. As a matter of fact, let's do that to the other joints that have been. Let's do this one right here. Add a little solder. And there you have it. Matrix Corsa PCB fully desoldered. If you're using flux, you can use isopropyl alcohol and maybe like a chem wipe or something to wipe off the the resin. If you use flux that is mess free, I have resin flux, and then I have the liquidy, the paste variant. If you use the desoldering method with the wick, yeah, use a isopropyl alcohol and Kim wipes, wipe your PCB clean. But yeah, all in all, very, very happy with this. I'll put the link below, but please don't feel like you have to buy, because I obviously don't have an Amazon affiliate link. So if you buy directly from this link, I'm not going to get anything. Keep an eye out for deals. Look at some other models that may be better priced or maybe have better features, like a temperature read, like a temperature gauge or something. But overall, I love this. I love this. If you are tired of using the solder sucker, if you're tired of using the desoldering pump and the iron using two hands, oh, that looks weird. No. Using two hands, and you do want to combine it into one, after maybe like 100 or so of this pumping action here, your thumb does get a little tired, but it's awesome. It's awesome to have a free hand when you're desoldering. Hey, if you're a big baller, you can use a FR301. You can use an actual desoldering gun. That's totally fine as well. There are pros and cons to everything. In my opinion, though, using one of these guys, very little con. A lot of pros, very little con. Con, pricier than just buying a solder sucker. Pro, cheaper than using a desoldering gun. Another pro is it's easier to clean. Yeah, you have to open this compartment up and remove the solder, clean it out. But you have to do that with a desoldering pump, and you have to do that with the FR304 anyways. If you can't get to a place to desolder, that's when you go with the desoldering braid, the copper braid, and the desoldering flux. If it's just for keyboard components, normal keyboard components, switches, you'll have no problem. If you're desoldering smaller components, that's when you go with the braid. But yeah, overall, man, this is awesome. So the cheapest, one of these guys. Actually, the cheapest is actually getting desoldering braid and flux. It depends. It depends. I've seen these guys, not the engineers, but I've seen similar pumps less than $10, right? With this and the desoldering braid, you get two things. I think it's a little more. And then the next step up is this, a nice middle ground between desoldering pump and an FR301 or desoldering gun. I will say, using one of these, the same strategy as using, well, anything. If you put this on the PCB for too long, the tip for too long, you can burn the pad. You can lift the pad, you can burn the PCB, you can damage the PCB. Make sure it's always flush to the PCB. Make sure you cock it all the way down. And as soon as you see that solder start melting, press the button. I hope you enjoyed this video. I would say that's a very skill-based, because if you gave me the FR301 as I started desoldering, chances are I probably would have done okay with it, but I definitely would have broken the tip off. I would have messed something up. So it's totally fine to slowly work your way up in terms of price point. You don't need an FR301. I would say this is totally fine for all your desoldering needs. It's even this, right? But hey, it's your money. You can decide what sort of soldering, what sort of desoldering technique you want to use, and what situations you need to use this or that. Anyways, thanks for watching. I love you all, and see you next time.